Guys, it has been a long road down the most unique draft season we've ever seen, but NFL Draft Week is finally upon us, and it's about time because cabin fever has been getting to some people here, and I can't even explain how much we need this 3-day escape from reality. Today I'm going to do a different kind of mock draft. This is my rumors edition. Some of you guys might remember this from last year. It was kind of popular, so I decided to follow it up again this year, and this year I've also added a research element to this where I have scoured this cool site called grindingthemocks.com, which has compiled the data of thousands and thousands of mock drafts since the beginning of last college football season. And I'm going to be breaking the draft down into 3 categories. But instead of trying to explain it now, we'll just figure it out as we go along. This is going to be my last mock draft video of the year. It's been a great season, and I really appreciate you guys watching and liking and commenting and subscribing to this channel. It's been one of the more exciting draft seasons that I've had, but I do have to ask for you to hit that like button one more time on this video. And I do owe you guys a live stream follow-up of my 4-round mock draft. That live stream will be on Wednesday night, probably around 9:30 or 10 p.m. Eastern time, so stay tuned for that. I'm gonna be trying some new stuff, so it's gonna be kind of a trial and error thing, but if things go well, I might go live at some point during the draft if things get really crazy. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's dive into this research and rumors mock draft. First up, we've got the Bengals, and this one has been pretty clear for a while, but it'll be a good example of how this mock draft is gonna go. On this first graph, you will see the number of mock drafts that have selected which player for the featured team. As you can see, this data collected by grindingthemocks.com has factored in over 1,500 mock drafts this season. The obvious outlier here shows you how hard Georgia fans go for their guy, Jake Fromm. While this chart shows you who the most commonly mocked player to a specific team is, this line graph shows you the trend as we've gotten closer to the actual NFL draft. As you can see, Joe Burrow has been on a steady rise since December. Then I'm going to show you this 3-way mock draft based on 1, the research of the fans and experts and their mock drafts. The second one will be based on the rumors and what they are pushing or leaning towards. And then the third one will be who I think that they will take, factoring in all the previous information. Hopefully you guys got all that, but let's run through number 2 since that's also a pretty simple one. At number 2, we've got the Redskins, and Chase Young has been the clear-cut favorite here for a while also. But as you can see, the Trent Williams trade request has influenced some mock drafts, with Andrew Thomas being the pick. And there's been talk of taking Tua Tagovailoa and possibly Josh Rosening Dwayne Haskins to another team. But since January, pretty much everyone has been on board with Chase Young being the pick here. I'm sure Redskins organization would love some team to offer them a trade worthy of giving up this pick, but I'm afraid no one is going to be able to offer equal value compared to selecting a generational pass rusher. And honestly, I feel like that's why we haven't heard much about their interest in Tua since the idea got floated around once or twice in March. Hopefully you guys are starting to get this. At number 3, we've got the Lions. Still a pretty predictable pick. That's why I'm going to try to run through these. Jeffrey Okudah is the easy pick for them due to the fact that they needed a corner going into the offseason, then they traded Darius Slay, so it's no surprise to see Okudah at the top of the chart here. The other defenders on this list also fill needs for the Lions, but either they weren't graded as highly or the positional value wasn't there for them to be given the nod here. And then there are a few Lions fans that pretended like Chase Young was going to make it past the Redskins. As you can see from the line graph, it's pretty similar to the first 2, with the trajectory being all Okudah since January. But yeah, I promise it starts to get interesting after this pick, and I'll be able to add a little bit more detail and thought to all of this. At number 4, the Giants have just as many needs as the previous 3 teams, but with each pick, the talent pool becomes harder and harder to sift through. I think it's pretty easy to cross Chase Young off this list, and the Jerry Jeudy talk has really leveled out since February. Really, I think that this Giants pick comes down to a 2-man race between Isaiah Simmons and an offensive tackle, especially Jedrick Wills in the last couple months. And that's just assuming that the Giants don't trade down. The rumors have actually been all about Gettleman trading down since his reputation is that he never trades down, but I thought that was a good idea over taking a running back or reaching on a quarterback. I don't know if I'm trading away from Isaiah Simmons, unless it's with the Chargers. You know, the Chargers might want to jump the Dolphins for whomever they think is actually the top quarterback on their board. We'll get to that later, but that would allow the Giants to still get one of these top 2 most mocked players. Isaiah Simmons slightly edges Jedrick Wills in the volume of mocks, and I do think that the rumors are leaning towards a trade down, even if it's only a couple of picks like I mentioned. I'm not picking trades here because that would just get way too confusing with all the moving parts, but in the end, I think the Giants end up with the safer option of Jedrick Wills. They've also got some connections to Alabama on the coaching staff, and I just think that Isaiah Simmons is just too bold of a move for Gettleman to make at this point, and he feels like he's on a little bit of thin ice, so he keeps it safe. Before I move on, I want to take a minute to thank the sponsor of this mock draft, Manscaped, and their new 3.0 waterproof body trimmer. For those that don't know, Manscaped is the only men's brand that is dedicated to below-the-waist grooming and hygiene. I'm a huge fan of Manscaped and their Perfect Package Essentials Kit, which is the world's first all-in-one manscaping kit that makes manscaping safe and easy. And with their newly released long Lawnmower 3.0 waterproof body trimmer. They've really taken this grooming thing to the next level with a ton of new upgrades. The lawnmower also comes with adjustable trimmer guards so you can choose how short you like to go. The upgraded motor features their trademark quiet stroke technology and provides a smooth trim that comes with the skin safe guarantee, so if you nick your sack you can send it back guaranteed. And the built-in LED light illuminates grooming areas for a closer, more precise trimming. As a subscriber you can get 20% off and 2 free gifts added if you use my promo code NFL20, that's NFL20, and with that you will get a pair of breathable Manscaped boxers and a free shred travel bag. So go ahead and check them out. I will have a link in the description and in the pinned comment, and don't forget my promo code NFL20. Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. At number 5, the Dolphins have been getting Tua mocked to them since last April, so it makes sense for him to be the top option here. And this data doesn't clarify which pick for each player, but I think it's pretty obvious that Tua and Justin Herbert have been getting mocked at 5, with Josh Jones and Kayvon Chason likely getting mocked at 18, and DeAndre Swift from Georgia getting mocked at 26. I think that this is a new site, so it's a little bit limited in the way that you can break down the data, but the line graph shows us the huge lead that Tua has had since before the college football season was over, and yet the stock for this marriage has tanked in the last 2 weeks. With all the uncertainty over Tua's actual health, and without team doctors being able to get him in for a physical, the uncertainty has people thinking that they could take Justin Herbert over him or even an offensive tackle. I think that these are just rumors to prevent teams from jumping in front of them and taking Tua, and their hope is that the Chargers execute that trade I mentioned earlier for Justin Herbert, or they just stay put and Tua falls right into their lap. This would be some grade A draft manipulation by the Dolphins, and I just don't see how you can let Tua slip by either way if you're the Dolphins. I understand that there are the health concerns, but you're probably planning on sitting him for the first year anyways, and with modern medicine I don't believe that there's an injury that we can't come back from to some degree other than these injuries to the brain, and I believe that 80-85% of Tua is still better than 100% of Justin Herbert. At number 6 for the Chargers, it's pretty clear everybody is trying to mock them a new quarterback or an offensive tackle to block for the next quarterback. I'm interested in the mock drafts by the Jordan Love truthers. They had them taking him so early on. I'd love to see how that scenario played out. Isaiah Simmons is also an interesting fit here, but I think he's too much of a luxury pick for these teams in the top 5 or 6 in this case, especially with all the offensive tackle depth and talent at the top. It's been a pretty common scenario to give the Chargers Justin Herbert here, even though the Tua mocks have picked up in the last month, and I think the Chargers will have their shot at Herbert, but I am the least confident with this pick compared to the previous 5. I could see them playing it safe and rolling with Tyrod Taylor for a year and waiting next year if Tyrod flops. Justin Herbert just doesn't do it for me when you need a new face of the franchise, so rely on those new uniforms to carry you through 2020 and reevaluate the quarterback position in 2021 when you can have a normal offseason and a new, possibly even better group of quarterbacks to choose from. At number 7, the Panthers are one of the harder teams in the top 10 to get a read on. Derek Brown seems like the safe option here, and then Isaiah Simmons is a smart option with the Luke Kuechly retirement and Joe Brady's experience against him in the national championship game where Isaiah Simmons was all over the place and was single-handedly wrecking Joe Brady's offense in the first half. But then it wouldn't shock me if they went completely off course with the common thought process and did something really unexpected. Personally, I don't think that they're getting a quarterback, so even though Herbert is listed, I don't think he's the pick even if he's available to them. We've heard some teams that might have Javon Kinlaw rated higher than Derek Brown. This was always one of the more believable rumors to me because of the fact that Kinlaw was such an ascending player and offers more of an interior pass rush than Derek Brown. So I actually think the Panthers are one of the teams looking for a trade down, and we've heard the Falcons and Broncos are big buyers in this draft, or at least they intend on being. Well, I don't think the Panthers would want to help out their NFC South rivals, especially when they're probably trying to trade up for one of the defenders the Panthers have their eyes on. But if the Panthers are unable to trade down, I think they have to get Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson. I've mentioned this before in a mock draft of mine. The Panthers, being a Carolina-based team, have never drafted a Clemson player, and if they are in somewhat of a rebuild mode and are also a buyer in the next year's quarterback market, no need to put all that pressure on Trevor Lawrence for being the first ever Clemson player when you can go ahead and grab one of his teammates this year. At number 8 with the Cardinals, after trading for DeAndre Hopkins, mocking a wide receiver to the Cardinals became somewhat redundant, and offensive tackle became the most glaring need for this offense. Before the trade, I have to admit, even I was intrigued by the idea of reuniting Kyler Murray and CeeDee Lamb, but I was surprised to see the volume of mocks that were still mocking CeeDee Lamb to the Cardinals. Jedrick Wills and Tristan Wirfs have been on a similar trajectory for the Cardinals in mock drafts over the last month, while the CeeDee Lamb talk has tapered off a little bit. I think despite the sheer number of overall picks for CeeDee Lamb, I'm going to go with the last last month of mock drafts here, as those are the more trending picks, and offensive tackle is easily the favorite among fans and experts. And say what you'd like about the credibility of Jason La Canfora, but there's not a lot of buzz out there regarding the Cardinals pick other than his report that this is as far as Derek Brown would drop, so take that for what it's worth. I happen to agree with the mock draft data and think that Tristan Wirfs is an easy pick here for the Cardinals if they don't actually end up entertaining a trade down. At number 9, we've got the Jaguars, and it's pretty clear the popular choice for them is to address the defense. Best player available at any 3 levels, really just make it the defense. Albert Breer reported that the Jaguars are already being touted as the Trevor Lawrence team because they've been looking for 2020 draft picks in pre-draft trade discussions. Georgia offensive tackle Andrew Thomas is the only top prospect the Jaguars have had an on-the-record meeting with in this unique year for the pre-draft process. I don't think I've seen anybody mock Thomas to the Jags, to be honest, but it actually does make sense and would be a solid move for them. There is a rumor out there that at least one team has CJ Henderson ahead of Jeffrey Okudah on their draft board. I think that sounds a little bit crazy, but doesn't it sound like something that the Jaguars would do? Another rumor floating around is that Clemson cornerback AJ Terrell is supposed to be drafted much higher than expectations and possibly even before CJ Henderson. Those are 2 completely different cornerback rumors heading into draft week, and you just know that at least one of these contradicting rumors is coming out of Jacksonville. Now this might seem out there, maybe not to some, but don't be too shocked if I'm terribly wrong.
I was way off.
And teams socially distance themselves from Tua because of his health situation, and he falls out of the top 8 picks and into Jacksonville's lap. I don't think there's any way that the Jags could pass on Tua. In my last mock, I had the Jaguars start the run on wide receivers with Jerry Jeudy. While I don't think that is actually going to be the outcome, I do think that it would be a wise one if you're actually trying to convince people that you want to win with Gardner Minshew. Otherwise, you're going to be the butt of all the tank for Trevor jokes all season long. But hey, at least then people will be talking about the Jaguars, right? At number 10 with the Browns, I think everyone agrees that their biggest need is one of these offensive tackles. The offensive tackles are almost ranked by best player available and most likely to still be available at number 10. Grant Delpit was in there from before the season was over, but that idea died in late January. The Browns are also a team rumored to be fielding offers to trade down, and that's because this draft is so rich in talent. Every GM should be placing a really high value on top 100 picks, and Browns' new GM, Andrew Berry, has an analytics background and will likely be trying to collect more day 2 picks in a trade down. There's a rumor that they really like Boise State offensive tackle Ezra Cleveland, and maybe will trade down and shock us all with him as the pick, but I'm not sure if I believe this one or if it's just a ploy to get the name Cleveland back on a jersey after dropping that look with their new classic uniforms. The rumor of the Browns possibly looking to move Odell Beckham Jr. is one that has been lingering for a while, but last week that trade scenario was rumored to have an actual dance partner in the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are a logical team to be interested in OBJ after trading Stephon Diggs, but I feel like that's trading one emotional sideline wide receiver for an even more emotional one. However, the Vikings are in win now mode, and a first round wide receiver won't make as much of an impact as Odell Beckham would, so I would turn right around and use the Bills first rounder you got for Diggs and get Odell Beckham Jr. with it if possible. We'll see if that rumor is legit by the end of Thursday, but another first rounder could help the Browns add an offensive lineman and double down on this like the Falcons did last year. After getting dinged for a diluted sample at the NFL Combine, Mekhi Becton is probably going to fall a little bit in the draft, and that pushes Andrew Thomas up to where he probably should have been all along, but was a victim to the overanalysis that players receive when they come into a season as one of the top prospects for the following draft. At number 11, the Jets need to replace Robbie Anderson as well as get Sam Darnold some pass protection, so it didn't surprise me to see the top 2 wide receivers and 3 of the top offensive tackles on the chart for the most commonly mocked players for them. While a lot of other teams were slower to act in having official formal meetings with players, which they probably all regret now, the Jets wasted no time at the NFL Combine and met with almost all the players listed here, as well as Jedrick Wills, Caleb Von Chason, and Julian Okwara. And they had a meeting with Tristan Wirfs set up for after the Combine, but that was likely changed to being a virtual meeting with all the cancellations. The Jets have been mocked a steady dose of Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb, but Andrew Thomas regained his lead over Tristan Wirfs a couple of weeks into March and hasn't rescinded from the backup option among fans and experts. The Jets are rumored to love one of these Alabama wide receivers. They also have Jamal Adams on the trade block after a report came out that he would not be attending voluntary virtual workouts. So I guess this means he's just going to hit ignore when Greg Williams tries to FaceTime him. If a team is looking for a trade for Jamal Adams, I will expect him to get a first round pick in return, right? So the Jets could add another pick in the back half of this first round, and that could alter their approach towards the draft. Personally, I think that drafting one of these wide receivers at 11 and then trading Jamal Adams to, I don't know, the Cowboys for number 17, and you could go and get Josh Jones or maybe even Mekhi Becton's going to be there. At number 12, getting a read on the Raiders has been pretty tough. Mike Mayock was always one of my favorite NFL draft personalities, but last year was kind of an underwhelming experience for me as a spectator. After a season, the draft class showed why Mike Mayock is the guy making the big bucks and I make YouTube videos. videos, but with 3 first-round picks, I was hoping for better value from him in the first round. I'm hoping that last year was the conservative, get your feet wet kind of draft for him, and this year he's going to make a splash like some predict if one of these wide receivers are still available. And because the Raiders have multiple first-round picks, players leading in volume get lumped together in this data, although I think it's pretty clear that Kenneth Murray is the only one mocked at pick 19. The other guys on this list will have to be taken at 12 if not sooner. The Raiders have met with some interesting prospects like Jeffrey Okudah, Kenneth Murray, Patrick Queen, Justin Herbert, and Jordan Love they met with twice. They've also met with CeeDee Lamb and Henry Ruggs. I couldn't actually find an official meeting with Jerry Jeudy, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't taken place in some degree. I keep bringing up the rumor saying that the Broncos and Falcons are wanting to trade up. Well, I think that the Raiders are the team that they're both trying to get in front of. The Broncos want a wide receiver, Henry Ruggs probably in particular, and I think that the Falcons want a linebacker or defensive tackle, or maybe they were one of the teams with the, let's say, unique quarterback rankings. Well, now the Raiders are the ones rumored to be interested in trading up too. Peter King says that Mike Mayock actually won't even be able to pass up on CJ Henderson and could even trade up for him. That would be quite the rise for Henderson, but this happens every year with an athletic cornerback, so it wouldn't shock me. I think trading up for a cornerback not named Jeffrey Okudah is crazy in this cornerback class, so I'm looking on the other side of the spectrum at wide receiver. Since I've already given the top 2 wide receivers in my version of this mock draft, I'm giving them the guy that I think is the best fit and whom I think the Broncos are targeting in a potential trade up in Henry Ruggs. So you're stealing a guy from a division rival, which is addition by subtraction, and the Raiders did get a chance to meet with Henry Ruggs at the NFL Combine, so they've definitely showed some interest in him at some point.
He's good. He's fast.
At pick number 13, I actually had to go in and update my numbers for the 49ers because grindingthemocks.com updated their database on the 19th of April, and you could see the drastic rise of the wide receivers being mocked to the 49ers. I find it interesting that CeeDee Lamb wasn't one of the top 2 wide receivers. I think that's because you're looking for a wide receiver with a different skill set, and CeeDee Lamb is a rack wide receiver, much like Deebo Samuel, and I think that they would like to add a sharper route runner to replace Emmanuel Sanders. Even though the graphs show a safety being the top overall option, the trend over the last month has been one of these wide receivers, and with Marquise Goodwin being shopped for a potential draft pick, Henry Ruggs has got to be one of the top options for the 49ers. There are rumors that the 49ers could take a space-eating defensive tackle here, which is probably pretty frustrating for 49ers fans, but this could be a fallback plan if the board plays out like I have it here. And the thought process here could be that instead of having to make DeForest Buckner the highest paid defensive tackle in the league, they moved him for another 4 or 5 years of an impact defensive tackle still on a rookie contract. And this rookie defensive tackle would have been drafted with this defensive scheme in mind instead of the 3-4 that Buckner was originally picked for. And for the record, I liked giving Jimmy Garoppolo a hard time in my weekly pick'em videos this past year, but I don't buy into any of the rumors that the 49ers are looking for a quarterback in this draft, at least not early on. Not only is Jimmy Garoppolo not that bad, but I don't think this front office or coaching staff would want to admit defeat on being wrong with Jimmy Garoppolo when he really was just an overthrow away from winning the Super Bowl. In my last mock draft, the 49ers ran out of elite wide receivers and offensive tackles, but Derrick Brown was not available in that mock draft, and I think he's the interior presence that could take this defensive line to a ridiculous level. Javon Kinlaw obviously could be an option too, but Brown feels like a safer option based on the personnel that the 49ers already have on their roster. At 14, the Bucs have one of the most diverse charts of all the teams thus far, which means they have a lot of holes and should be able to take the best player available. With Tom Brady, I think you've got to address this offensive line though. Redskins offensive tackle Trent Williams is a name that could be on the move during this draft, and the Buccaneers would be a prime landing spot for him. I don't think that Trent Williams is going to be moved for more than a second round pick, but if the Bucs think that they could land him, I could see them passing on an offensive tackle at 14, but I'm not allowing Mekhi Becton to fall any further based on a trade rumor or a failed drug test for that matter. If Laramie Tunsil can have a video of him wearing a gas mask leaked right before the draft and only fall to pick 13, then Becton shouldn't fall much further than that. At 15 for the Broncos, I learned early on in the draft season that the Broncos fans and front office had a lot of interest in adding a wide receiver opposite of Courtland Sutton. I love Sutton as a wide receiver 1, and while adding a first round wide receiver across from him is somewhat of a luxury pick, it makes sense when you're trying to set up a young quarterback for success like this. Mocks featuring Henry Ruggs have skyrocketed since February, and with Sutton being a bigger bodied possession wide receiver and Locke having a cannon that can stretch the field, Ruggs is a natural fit.
He's really fast.
I've mentioned a few times that there are rumors that the Broncos could be trading up, most likely for a wide receiver, although I'm not sure if I believe that it's truly with Jerry Jeudy in mind. The rumor I heard that feels more likely of a scenario is that if the cost of trading up is too rich, the Broncos are fine with sitting at 15 and taking Justin Jefferson. It's not a perfect fit as a complementary player like Ruggs is, but it's a safe fallback plan if you really do want to lock up a wide receiver. I'm not one to buy too much into draft rumors, but Justin Jefferson does seem like a solid fit for the Broncos, Broncos and their obvious attempts to upgrade the wide receiver position. Also, don't forget about Deshaun Hamilton. He came on strong at the end of the year with Drew Luck starting and after the Emmanuel Sanders trade. He's also coming into his third year, which is usually when wide receivers see the biggest development jump. Drafting Justin Jefferson would give the Broncos two similar wide receivers though that can play the Z and the slot, but they would still be missing that deep speed aspect that makes Henry Ruggs so appealing. So don't rule out addressing a need at cornerback at 15 and then hoping to get a guy like KJ Hamler, who might be the fastest guy in this draft overall, early in the second round. At 16 for the Falcons, you can see that AJ Epinesa got off to a fast start as an easy choice to mock for the Falcons, but after looking slow and stiff at the NFL Combine, his draft stock has fallen considerably, and the pairing with the Falcons at 16 is just completely leveled off. K'Lavon Chaisson and CJ Henderson are the most commonly mocked players for the Falcons in the last month. Henderson makes sense after letting Desmond Trufant go, but personally, I think the Dante Fowler signing could allow the Falcons to pass on K'Lavon Chaisson altogether. Although you can never have too many pass rushers, and Takk McKinley might not be in their long-term plans, so Chaisson could be a guy that they grab now as a rotational pass rusher with plans for the future. The rumors that the Falcons want to trade up are hardly even rumors at this point. I think it's pretty clear, even from Falcons GM Thomas Dimitroff, that trading up is something the Falcons want to do. I think I've heard the term aggressive be used numerous times. They obviously still think that they're only a couple pieces away from a Super Bowl and are willing to sacrifice some depth for someone that will get them over that hump. I think they want either one of these defensive tackles or an athletic cover cornerback, and CJ Henderson is one of the most athletic in the class. Cornerback is probably the most glaring need on their defense also. I'd be willing to bet is the need that they want to trade up for to secure their guy. In this scenario without trades though, I have the defensive tackles falling a little bit simply because this was one of the most saturated positions with free agency and is one where you can still address it with legit talented veteran that could start for you in day one. For example, Mike Daniels, Damon Harrison, Marcel Darius, Corey Liuget, all of those guys are really talented and still unsigned. But the Falcons have tried the retreads and they haven't worked out for them. And for all we know, they could actually be targeting Kinlaw in a trade up anyways and have just been using other smoke screens to distract from that. So Kinlaw is just too talented and is too much of a fit for the Falcons. I can't let him slide any further than 16. At number 17, the Cowboys have needed a safety since Roy Williams got that second contract and realized, hey, hitting guys that are coming across the middle actually hurts me more than it does them. I think that situation has really turned the Jones family off from using valuable resources to acquire a long-term safety, despite being linked to guys like Earl Thomas and Jamal Adams in the past. But still, everybody has mocked a safety to the Cowboys at some point this offseason, and Xavier McKinney and Grant Delpit have gone back and forth as the Cowboys' most mocked prospect. But CJ Henderson and Christian Fulton have made a climb since letting Byron Jones go in free agency. Javon Kinlaw has also been a steady riser for them, even though they drafted Tristan Hill in the second last year. Hill was a healthy scratch for them in quite a few games in 2019, but that was for a different coaching staff, so I'm not ready to give up on him just yet. But if Javon Kinlaw is somehow still available, he'd be a good safe value pick at this point. The Cowboys haven't hidden their interest in Oklahoma linebacker Kenneth Murray this year, even as far as posting a clip of his interview with Jerry, Steven, and the coaching staff, and drafting him would signal maybe a little buyer's remorse with Jalen Smith, or even worse, Leighton Vander Esch's neck is worse than LVE is willing to admit. At safety, Xavier McKinney is rumored to be favored in Dallas over Grant Delpit, a guy that I'm pounding the table for, of course, but I was pounding the table for Juan Thornhill last year, and they took a backup defensive tackle with maturity issues that probably would have been there in the third round. And the third player that I've heard that the Cowboys are very high on is Michigan center Cesar Ruiz. It would be fitting to trade down and pick a center from the Big Ten because that's exactly the scenario that led to the Cowboys taking Travis Frederick. I don't think the Cowboys necessarily need a center, and I'd rather see one of the Connors on their roster, either Williams or McGovern, end up being the future starter at center. But Ruiz would give them a younger, solid anchor to build around and maintain the offensive line being a strength for the team. But the rumor that I am the most intrigued by is the one that roots back to the 2019 trade deadline involving Jets safety Jamal Adams. I'm not a huge fan of trading first for players that need or want new contracts, and there is logic to the common question, why would you pay Jamal Adams when you wouldn't pay Byron Jones? And listen, I love Byron Jones as a player and maybe even more as a person. I want 53 Byron Joneses on my roster, but Jamal Adams is a more impactful player at a position that is much harder to find impact players. If Byron Jones made an interception after his move back to cornerback, the Jones family probably would have paid him the very next day. But as good as he was at covering wide receivers and tight ends, he only had 2 interceptions in 5 seasons. His freak athleticism made him almost too good at covering wide receivers, and he didn't get thrown at enough. And when he did, he wasn't in position to jump the pass because he was right on top of a wide receiver. So yeah, sign me up for trading number 17 for Jamal Adams, because this dude gets turnovers, can be your nickel linebacker, and I don't think we've even seen him play his best football yet. But anyways, in this scenario, I've got the Cowboys taking CJ Henderson here to replace Byron. I don't actually think that Henderson makes it to 17, nor do I think the Cowboys end up staying put at 17, but I do see defensive back as a position that they will be selecting with one of their first two picks, if not doubling down and getting a safety and a cornerback in the first and second rounds. But if the Falcons end up taking Henderson, well, I've been on the Kayvon Chason train for the Cowboys for a while and would love the guy right here. I just don't think the Cowboys will pick him. I think Jerry Jones still believes that Randy Gregory will come back and be a double-digit sack guy, and who knows, he might be. But it was the Aldon Smith signing that really made me pessimistic about Chason becoming a Cowboy. Even though Aldon Smith's contract is really easy to cut ties with, it's an ego thing for Jerry, and I don't think that they want 3 pass rushers before solidifying the secondary. At 18, the Dolphins have secured the bag with their selection of Tua. Now they've got to protect their investment with one of these other 2 picks in the first round. They're floating rumors of taking an offensive tackle at 5 instead of Tua, but I already let you know that I'm not buying what they're selling, and could even see them hoping that that rumor leads to teams assuming that they plan on addressing the offensive line at 18 and maybe throw the cent off there too. I've done a couple of mocks where I've picked a player that has dropped into their lap at 18 and they were still able to get a solid offensive tackle at 26. But even as a mock drafter, I'm getting cold feet with just the idea of letting an offensive tackle that I feel comfortable with fall past them right here in hopes that he's still on the board in 8 picks. So I'm playing it safe and taking Josh Jones here. At 19, the Raiders are back on the clock and they haven't had great play from the linebacker position in a long time, and the talent pool dries up a lot quicker in this draft class than it does at cornerback, so I understand why so many people have given the Raiders a linebacker here. It's also a really safe bet that the second and third best linebacker will still be on the board at this point, whereas we may see a small run on cornerbacks from 14 to 17, depleting the value at that position. The Raiders have done their homework on Kenneth Murray, and even though he doesn't excite me as much as Patrick Queen, I understand why teams will have him higher on their draft board. The Raiders have had a private meeting set up with Murray, and he was going to be making an official 30 visit, but it was canceled right after everything went down. But I'm assuming that they made up for that with a virtual meeting. So if it looks like Kenneth Murray and it quacks like Kenneth Murray, I'm not going to question the pick being Kenneth Murray. At 20, the Jaguars are back on the clock, and the mock draft data said that the Jaguars should take Derek Brown at 9, leaving cornerback as the most likely position for them to address at 19, but similarly to the Raiders, they might not like the selection after the teens with the top cornerback depth. But sticking with the trends, Christian Fulton is still available, so that's who the general public would pick here, and I happen to agree. I think Fulton would be neck and neck with CJ Henderson as a consensus number 2 cornerback in this class if he was able to work out for teams. Now the Jaguars haven't had any official meetings with top cornerbacks on the record, but quite a few guys that are projected to be day 2 or 3 guys, so they could be looking to double dip at the position. And then don't forget Yannick Ngakoue trying to tweet his way out of Jacksonville. While it was entertaining and pretty funny, I think that the Jaguars owner Shad Khan had a good point. He's probably not helping the trade value at this point, and if the Jaguars want to be stubborn, they can hold on to him for as long as they want, even up until the trade deadline of this upcoming season, especially if they are in fact trying to acquire picks for the 2021 NFL draft. I think ultimately Ngakoue will get traded in this draft, but I don't see it being for a first round pick, maybe an early second if you're lucky. At 21, the Eagles' needs have been pretty clear since about mid-season when they were ravaged by injuries on the boundary on both offense and defense. They're likely going to draft a cornerback and a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, with the order in which they pick them based on however the board falls. They've been getting mocked Henry Ruggs III, they wish, and Justin Jefferson the most during this draft process, and then Christian Fulton and T. Higgins and Laviska Shenault rounding out the top 5. So I think everyone agrees that they should go for a wide receiver at 21, but Henry Ruggs is not going to be available. I can promise you that. And Justin Jefferson used to be my safe option for the Eagles, but he went off the board 5 picks ago with the Broncos rumored interest, so the Eagles might have to reach on a wide receiver if they want to get their guy. The Eagles have been attached to almost every wide receiver on the trade block for a couple seasons now, most recently with Brandon Cooks. After throwing so many trade offers out at the wall, I understand the rumor that the Eagles want to trade up for the wide receiver that they want, and they could reach out to their old buddy in Cleveland, former Eagles Vice President of Football Operations Andrew Berry, and try to move up to number 10 for a wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy would be a really good fit for Carson Wentz, so yeah, they are a legit trade-up candidate. And imagine if the Browns dropped all the way to 21, this would be the perfect place for them to get their Ezra Cleveland. In this final mock draft of mine, Justin Jefferson got snatched up, so I have the Eagles turn their attention to another wide receiver with future wide receiver 1 abilities, and that's Denzel Mims. At 22, we've got the Vikings, and the fall of Xavier Rhodes is one of the most neglected mysteries in the NFL. The Vikings defense was one of the elite in the league when he went by Rhodes closed, and they're still a solid unit, but even after drafting so many cornerbacks in the last few seasons, they find themselves lacking cornerbacks that could start start in week 1. So that's why they've been mocked every top cornerback not named Jeffrey Okudah. Trayvon Diggs has been the clear leader here among fans and experts, but that momentum started when his older brother Stephon was still a member of the team. I really don't think that they're going to add him now when his brother left on not the greatest of terms. The CJ Henderson mocks have also cooled since he's risen up draft boards, and there's a gauntlet of cornerback needy teams leading up to the Vikings pick. But Christian Fulton and Jeff Gladney are definitely candidates for the Vikings at 22, with Christian Fulton having the most steam in the last few weeks. Jeremy Fowler from Sports Illustrated reported that word around the league is that the Vikings are going to trade back, and I actually played out a scenario in my 4th mock draft, I think, where they trade down with the Colts, who are trying to get up for Jordan Love. Vikings fans were upset because they've already got so many picks, but you can trade down, still pick a baller at 25, and then you got ammunition to move around all draft long. That allows you to handpick the guys that you want before getting sniped by other teams. Also, the next 2 teams have been pumping up the rumors that they are in love with a specific quarterback, so if he's on the board, I could see teams looking to get in front of them, so the market might set a price for the Vikings that they just can't refuse. And the Patriots at 23, my nightmare. Jordan Love has sprinted to the top choice of mocks for the Patriots, and I get it, I just don't want it to happen. Belichick is really good at manipulating the draft rumor, so naturally the Patriots are rumored to have a lot of interest in Jordan Love. Just don't make me talk about it any more than I have to, alright? At 24 with the Saints, I was surprised to see Jalen Reagor as one of the main trends for the Saints, and I don't think I've mocked him there once, but Justin Jefferson is a seamless pick because of the need and local proximity, but since the beginning of April, Kenneth Murray has been the biggest riser as a trending pick for the Saints, while the wide receiver picks have cooled, and Emmanuel Sanders is mostly to blame for that. And usually when you have a veteran quarterback making a final run at a Super Bowl, you only want to spend 1st round picks on guys that can make an immediate impact to help the cause, right? But Drew Brees has already got a contract with NBC where he wants to be groomed to potentially take over for Chris Collinsworth on Sunday Night Football, and in the meantime he'll be an analyst for Notre Dame games as soon as he retires from playing. Well, the guy that has been sneaking up on the Saints draft chart is Jordan Love, and the rumors of the Saints having interest in using a 1st round pick on a quarterback have been swirling ever since. I'm not sure if the Saints are being petty because Brees already has 1 foot out the door, or if they don't believe he's enough anymore to get them over the hump. Maybe it's a combination of both, but Sean Payton must not be planning on hanging him up anytime soon if he's trying to get a guy like Jordan Love ready for 2021. And for the record, I love the idea, pun not intended this time, of Jordan Love and Sean Payton. For some reason, the Love puns coming out of a friendly place like Louisiana don't seem as obnoxious as they seem if they were coming out of Boston. Plus, this offense is set up so well for a rookie quarterback to come in and have a Russell Wilson effect and give them a 4 to 5 year Super Bowl window. And Love working with Sean Payton is the kind of scenario that helps Patrick Mahomes have instant success. This is actually one of the scenarios I will be rooting for on draft night. But without a trade up, I just don't see how Jordan Love makes it to the Saints. So in my mock, I've got them still scouting that LSU pool of talent and selecting Patrick Queen. I'm not sure why these LSU players have so many doubters, but these kids can play, and Queen would provide an instant impact for this defense. At 25, the Vikings are back, and the mock draft data only provides us with Josh Jones as an alternate position to take here, assuming the Vikings wouldn't double dip at cornerback so early. So while I can give them Josh Jones as the leading candidate for the mock draft trends and who the field thinks that they would take here, that doesn't help me make my decision for them because the Dolphins already picked Josh Jones at 18. Out of the other players the Vikings have officially met with, the only other player that I could see being a fit at number 25 would be the guy the Browns want to get cute with because of his last name, Boise State offensive tackle Ezra Cleveland. It would make sense that the Vikings and Browns both have interest in the same offensive tackle though, with Brown's new head coach being the Vikings' old offensive coordinator, and Ezra Cleveland is actually very similar to Brian O'Neill in their build and athletic testing. I actually didn't think that Brian O'Neill played that poorly, and I've neglected offensive tackle for the Vikings I think in all my multi-round mocks, and guess what, I'm going to do it again, not because I'm stubborn, okay, maybe a little bit because I'm stubborn, but because the Vikings need guys that can create plays with the balls in their hand. Kirk Cousins is going to panic under pressure regardless of how much protection he gets. That's just kind of his thing. The trick is to design the plays so that he doesn't need to hold the ball for so long. And maybe I'm just higher on Jalen Reagor than most, but I think I mocked him to the Vikings once before and compared him to Percy Harvin. He might not be as agile as Harvin, but the rest of the game is there for Reagor to be a solid utility weapon, especially next to a possession guy like Adam Thielen. At 26, the Dolphins have already landed 2 of the 5 players most commonly mocked to them in Tua Tagovailoa and Josh Jones, with 2 other players from this list still available. DeAndre Swift and Kayvon Chaisson are still on the board, and I'm the type that unless unless you're only a consistent running game away from a Super Bowl run, I'm not taking a running back in the first round unless he is the second coming of Adrian Peterson showing up to the draft like Leon Sandcastle. Based on the pre-draft visits, the Dolphins never even actually met with DeAndre Swift, but have met with J.K. Dobbins, so that's a name to pay attention to in the second round. But they have met with Michigan center Cesar Ruiz, and this is about the range I think he ends up going, and it would really help turn this offensive line around. Every time I do a mock that has K'Lavon Chaisson making it past the Falcons and Cowboys, the Dolphins seem to end up with Chaisson and Josh Jones, but maybe not always in that order. Somehow, Chaisson has not gained the steam that I expected him to this offseason, and I partially blame the cancellation of workouts and interviews for that. Without those, teams can't see why he was such a leader of a national championship defense and why they gave him that number 18 jersey. They also can't get in front of Chaisson and see the athleticism displayed in a workout, or that he's physically really well built and has the frame that can put on some good weight in an NFL lifting program, instead of his lean college build that has people thinking he's too small to set the edge and then not good enough in space to make up for his shortcomings. For me, Chaisson is a pound the table kind of guy, and the Dolphins would be really lucky to come away from this draft with the first 3 picks being 3 of the most important positions in football: quarterback, offensive tackle, and edge rush. At 27 for the Seahawks, Yetur Gross-Matos has been an easy mock for them since February. The problem with this kind of outlier data is that it becomes pretty clear to other teams that may want to snipe YGM from them, like the Titans or Ravens, for example, and I went in on the Seahawks in my last mock. Sorry for those that got offended, but I was really glad that so many Seahawks fans were able to enjoy it and laugh at it rather than taking it so seriously. And this time I've got some stats from Peter King to share with you that provide context to why it's always an entertaining scenario when the Seahawks are on the clock. In the last 3 drafts, Seahawks GM John Snyder has made 26 trades, not including compensation picks. You only get 7 picks a year. In 3 years, that's 21. There's more trades than standard picks that they've gotten in the last 3 years. In the last 8 drafts, so going all the way back to 2012, John Snyder has traded his first round pick every single year, and twice in 2017 and 2019. Now, if these trades have been working out for the Seahawks, then nobody would joke about their draft approach. In fact, Snyder would be on his way to the Hall of Fame if all these moves had been working out. But the most accomplished player that the Seahawks have drafted in the last decade in the first 2 rounds doesn't even play for them anymore, and that's Frank Clark. Luckily, DK Metcalf fell right into their lap and might end up being the best player the Seahawks have drafted since Russell Wilson, but Snyder and the Seahawks need a really good class year to cover up their recent flops, because the depth on this team is starting to suffer. The scenario that I was talking about that I framed was an instructional parody based around how to draft like John Snyder, and that ended with the Seahawks taking small school defensive back Jeremy Chin. I don't think that's actually what's going to happen, but they will more than likely trade down and collect picks. That's what they do. If they somehow defy all odds and stay put at 27, they're going to have a great chance at Yetur Gross-Matos, unless some other team falls in love with him and jumps in front of them like I explained earlier. At 28, I am impressed that the Ravens don't have any wide receivers in the top 5 of their most mocked players. It's all linebackers and pass rushers, and it's cute that Kenneth Murray is so high up there, but I just don't think that that's in the cards for the Ravens, although he does fill a big need. Patrick Queen might be there for the Ravens, but I doubt that too. These linebackers are built for the future of the NFL, and I think that they might end up being a hotter commodity than some expect. The Ravens have been pretty tight-lipped in regards to the guys that they are targeting at 28, and choosing to speak out more on the concerns over the virtual draft security. A dang Belichick lives rent-free in the mind of John Harbaugh. When examining the Ravens' official visits, Terrell Lewis was the only player I saw in this range that was still available, but I think he might have some medical flags that are going to really drop him down the board. Without the linebackers still on the board, I'm actually leaning back towards my mock draft number 4 pick, and that's a new athletic center for Lamar Jackson to grow with, despite the fact that the Ravens haven't even officially met with any interior offensive linemen other than Louisiana's Robert Hunt, but he's not playing center anytime, so maybe the team just feels good about Matt Skura and wants a good road grader at guard to replace Marshall Yanda. At 29, we've got the Titans, and it's funny how so many of these teams late in the first round have YGM as one of the top projected guys. That's not a sign that he goes way higher in this draft, and I don't know what is. The Titans also have K'Lavon Chaisson and Terrell Lewis here as edge rushers, one of their only needs, despite Harold Landry and Vic Beasley as the current projected starters. The Titans were heavy favorites to be signing Jadeveon Clowney, and negotiations fell through, mostly for the lack of personal contact and inability for a team doctor to put him through a physical. But check this out. I also read that this could be on hold until after April 27th, because the new CBA establishes at 4 p.m. Eastern time on the Monday after the draft, that's April 27th this year, that is the cutoff for free agent signings counting for or against calculations for 2021 compensatory picks. So the Browns signing Jack Conklin away from the Titans could net the Titans a 3rd round comp pick, but the salary that you can expect Clowney to command would cancel out that Conklin loss, and that's why Clowney not only hasn't signed with them, but there's been no talk talks about him signing at all. This is the kind of loophole that you'd have to assume Mike Vrabel picked up from his time around Belichick. I'm not sure who really figured this out, honestly, but it would explain the Madden leak of Clowney in a Titans uniform. Madden might have a ton of bugs and frustrate the hell out of us, but those guys at EA are wired in with the NFL and don't typically get that kind of stuff wrong. So I actually think that this saves the Titans from addressing the edge rush, because a former number 1 overall pick is more than likely on the way to help. Speaking of Jack Conklin, let's get them a replacement for him. Austin Jackson is the only offensive tackle the Titans have met with an on-the-record meeting that they could take here at 29, and he's a little more of a finesse player than I would expect the Titans to be interested in, and that could be the only reason that they actually met with him, to see if the personality matches the play. So I think I'm going to actually have them steal a player that the Browns were interested in Ezra Cleveland. He feels comparable to what the Titans were getting from Jack Conklin, but might not be as good of a run blocker, which could hurt his potential fit with this run-first offense. The other guy I considered was the mammoth from Georgia, Isaiah Wilson, but I still think that guy might be a better guard at the NFL level. At 30 with the Packers, mock draft data, it's exactly what I've been trying to say for the past 4 months. They need a wide receiver, and the order is almost exactly what I would have said in February and early March, but the medical concerns with Laviska Shenault could make him fall into the second round. The Packers are another team rumored to be doing their due diligence on Jordan Love, and it would be fitting for Aaron Rodgers' career to end in similar fashion to the way his began, with a young quarterback being drafted late in the first round to be groomed as an heir, even though the current starter hasn't mentioned hanging him up anytime soon. But I highly doubt the Packers move up for Love, and that's likely the only way they could really get him. So instead, I'm going back to Shenault and Reagor, because they are both just such good fits to replace Randall Cobb. Now, in my mock draft, Jalen Reagor is already gone, so assuming Shenault is going to fully recover from this core injury, I think the Packers will have enough wide receivers on their roster to ease Shenault into the season, which is the likely treatment most rookies will receive in this strange season ahead of us anyways, regardless of health. But you want to make him an impact player in the playoffs more than you do in week 1. Shenault could really provide this offense with a nice jolt, and will probably remind everybody of Cordarrelle Patterson, who they've seen enough of on the Vikings and Bears. At 31, after the top 3 wide receivers were all sniped from the 49ers at 13, they just saw another one taken right before they got on the clock. But I don't think they're as interested in CeeDee Lamb as they are the Alabama wide receivers, so it's unlikely that they wanted Laviska Shenault anyways, because he is way too similar to Deebo Samuel, but with dreads. Defensive back is also a big need for the 49ers that they'll try to fill with one of the 2 first rounders, and Xavier McKinney checks in as the most commonly mocked player for the 49ers. He grabbed the lead in this race back in December, and mock drafters never looked back. Grant Delpit gained some steam on him, but that hype train was halted this month. Trayvon Diggs has been a steady riser for the 49ers at 30 since early March, and fits the big cornerback mold that they like down by the bay. I really want to peg the 49ers as the source of the AJ Terrell rumors, but I can't find a trail connecting the 2 parties with any pre-draft visits or conversations, and since it's lying season, I'm just going to assume that they were involved somehow, because he's also a long cornerback that could excel in this scheme and was originally projected to be drafted right around this area. So they were probably pretty experienced with him before they even acquired the 13th overall pick, but I'm going with Diggs here because I think the 49ers front office really values the Alabama program and will use that as a tiebreaker between similar prospects, and when put up against fellow Alabama defensive back Xavier McKinney just doesn't feel like a true game changer to me, and Diggs is just a much more unique and rare cornerback blend of skill and athleticism and size that you're not going to find very often. At 32, I am glad to see that the numbers say I'm not alone in thinking that the Chiefs are the only situation where taking your running back in the first actually makes sense, but I've watched Andy Reid closely for far too long, and I realized he was onto this philosophy long before most, so it's unlikely he uses a top 50 pick on a running back, let alone number 32. The Chiefs will probably end up drafting Zach Moss at pick 96, and he'll go off for 1,000 yards in a season where all the other rookies are barely making an impact because of the weird offseason. And let's be honest, most mock drafters doing 1-round mock drafts are just tired by the time they hit 32 and see that a running back hasn't come off the board yet, so giving the Chiefs a running back is an easy way to call it a day and just end the mock draft. Today, as I was recording this video, a draft rumor came out about the Chiefs trading up to draft Henry Ruggs III, and I almost feel like we're being trolled by the Chiefs front office with this one.
He's so fast. He makes fast people look not fast.
But can you imagine the speed coming at you from all directions with Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman, and Henry Ruggs? And Sammy Watkins might not be as fast as he once was, but he can still turn it on once he gets the ball in his hands. Plus, Travis Kelce is one of the fastest tight ends in the league. That would just be a crazy receiving core. And then you give all those weapons and all that speed to the best quarterback in the league. To me, though, this troll rumor is indicative of how much higher the Chiefs front office expects Henry Ruggs to go than anywhere the Chiefs could realistically get in trade range for. sure. I actually think the Chiefs will trade down, and Antoine Winfield Jr. will be the guy that they are targeting. Winfield has got the ability to play any position in the secondary, and that kind of versatility is pretty much what they needed from guys in 2019 en route to their Super Bowl victory, especially after Thornhill went down with a torn ACL. Winfield could be the nickel cornerback and backup safety as a rookie while being groomed to eventually replace Tyrann Mathieu in a few years. Winfield fits that new mold of defensive back that is more of a cornerback safety combo and has the football IQ of a 10-year veteran from studying with his dad since he was a little kid. That's going to do it for me. I hope you guys are ready because this is going to be just one of the most unpredictable drafts that we've ever seen and one of the most unique presentations that as fans of the NFL draft we will probably remember. We're going to see things like technical difficulties and the inside of NFL GM's houses and stuff. It's going to be like a NFL edition of MTV Cribs at times. But at the end of the day, everybody's favorite football team will be coming away with a 2020 NFL draft class, and each one of those draft classes will have the chance to drastically change the future of all 32 NFL teams, except for the Browns because, you know, they're just an eternal factory of sadness.
You are a factory of sadness!
Just kidding, Cleveland. You know I love you guys. And with the draft being in Cleveland next year, and I missed out on the opportunity to actually visit the draft for the first time ever this year with it in Vegas. I'm only a 6-hour drive away from Cleveland. I will definitely be making every single effort possible next year to attend the draft in person. So don't let me down, Cleveland. I'll definitely want to check out my old stomping grounds in Strongsville while I'm there. So maybe we can plan some sort of draft party all together. Let's pump the brakes on those plans and just get ready to enjoy the draft this week. And then after the draft, make sure you guys stay tuned, turn your notifications on, all that good stuff, because I've got some really fun ideas to help this weird offseason go by a little bit faster once we can shift our attention away from the draft and more just on the upcoming NFL season. And I will see you all in the next video.